If you've been told that common law trusts are a secret weapon for privacy, asset protection, and tax benefits, well, you're being misled. Bad trust planning doesn't just waste your money, it can cause family fights, IRS headaches, and endless frustration. Hi, I'm John Strohmeyer with Strohmeyer Law, where we help our clients leave no unfinished business. While I am a lawyer, I am not your lawyer, so don't take the advice of some talking head on the internet. Make sure you talk to your own advisor about your specific circumstances. Also, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, today we're talking about the myths in a recent Forbes article about trusts and why falling for that bad advice really can cost you. When we think about the four horsemen of the estate planning apocalypse, we've got three of them at play here. First, increased costs. You're wasting money on a plan that's based on misleading claims. That's not going to work, and it's probably going to cost you more to fix than to have done it right the first time. I've seen certain plans where somebody was told about a magical tax solution where everything stayed in trust and nobody ever had to pay any taxes. Pro tip, if somebody's telling you there are no taxes because of a trust, they are selling you something that is not going to work. There's no magical income tax trust that's going to avoid all income taxes. It just doesn't work, and it's not a secret of the rich and famous. Next, fights. We may be getting you into a fight that you don't want. I just mentioned a trust that was having some very bad tax consequences. Well, that led to a fight with the IRS. Again, false promises about what trusts can and can't do can lead to disputes with the IRS, state regulators, and possibly other family members. Again, this is not what you're looking for. You're looking to make things easier for your family, not create a fight either between the family members or between the beneficiaries and the IRS. Finally, frustration and delays. These trusts aren't going to back up what the claims have been made, leaving you, your family, and others stuck in legal limbo trying to get things fixed. Be careful with what you're buying. So, what is a trust? Well, in reality, a trust is just a legal arrangement where a trustee manages assets for its beneficiaries. A grantor or trust donor or settlor, depending on where you have set up your trust, has contributed assets to the trustee. That trustee is then responsible for it. The Forbes article mentioned it was just a contract to grow assets. And that's not really what a trust is. Trust is a legal arrangement governing the beneficial ownership of assets. The beneficiary has beneficial interest, but not legal title. The trustee has legal title, but no beneficial interest necessarily. That separation is how we get the management in a trust. So what's misleading is that the article suggests that trusts inherently provide some sort of business and tax benefits. Yes, it's possible to get a benefit from either business or tax benefits, but really that's not what we're usually looking for in the way that they've suggested it. Now, again, you're wasting money. Trusts structured on these bad assumptions can cause bigger problems later on. Now, the big problem with this article is it creates a false dichotomy between statutory trusts and common law trusts. But the reality is there's not a distinction. All trusts are subject to common law, which is court-created law, and they're also generally going to be governed by state statutory law, which provides some certain basic outlines and basic rules for how trusts operate. So if a trust is silent on a provision or doesn't address something, then state statutory law comes in to fill in the gaps. For instance, here in Texas, we have the Texas Trust Code, which is part of the larger Texas Property Code. Those chapters in the Texas Property Code have all those provisions, how you change trustees, how you allocate assets between beneficiaries and remainder beneficiaries, if you need to change a trust provision. It's all there in the Texas Trust Code. Because there may not be a provision in a trust because the trust is so old, nobody thought about it. That's okay. But what the important thing to think of is while statutory trusts are an issue in that these trusts are going to be governed by state law, there's not a distinction between a common law trust and a state statutory trust. Any trust that gets created is going to be subject to, again, here in Texas, the Texas Trust Code. If you're in a state that uses the Uniform Trust Code, then the provisions that are applicable and as enacted in your state, those are going to be what govern. There's also a thought that a statutory trust is going to cause higher taxation. Again, this is not a distinction. The provisions of that trust will give you a few options, and it doesn't matter that there's this made up distinction between statutory trusts and common law trusts. Trusts are going to be taxed for income tax purposes as well as estate and gift tax purposes based on their provisions. The options, because there's no distinction between a common law trust and a statutory trust, are irrelevant. You can have a complex trust, which is how trusts are normally taxed, or you can have a grantor trust. There are a few other very specialized options. We're not going to get into those, but that's it. Either the trust is taxed based on its own assets and the trustee files that return. Any income that gets distributed to beneficiaries may get allocated to the beneficiary. If it's a grantor trust, the grantor of that trust gets the tax bill and the trust escapes it. So common law trusts, again, they're not a thing. Common law trusts can't override government regulation or state statutory law for fiduciary relationships. The claim that they're based on the Constitution, it's a distortion. That Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution says that contracts won't be abrogated. Well, no trust is going to be immune from tax law, creditor claims, or other court scrutiny just based on that. So you're setting yourself up again for IRS fights, for wasting your money, and for frustration when things don't work the way you want. So catastrophizing into the worst case scenario. If someone follows this advice and sets up a constitutional trust, assuming that common law trusts are actually a thing, well, they think that they've built some strong asset protection or some strong tax strategy. Well, they could later face an IRS audit, perhaps penalties, and then fighting about it because that structure wasn't legally sound. It didn't work and it was never going to. Beyond that, the family gets stuck dealing with that fallout in court or paying those back taxes that should have been paid in the first place. So this is not a place to get cute. Following the advice online, well, just because somebody said it, unfortunately, doesn't mean it's right. And I know I say this as a talking head on the internet telling you this isn't going to work. But think about it. Do you actually think that there are ways to avoid all these taxes and to just magically have things go away? No. And that's why you want to use trusts in the right way. Generally speaking, you can use trust to avoid wasting money, avoid fights, and simplify things. Working with somebody who knows what they're doing and not somebody who's just selling the secrets will help you get the right thing. Trust should be built for real legal and financial goals, not vague promises of secrecy and tax loopholes. I've been practicing tax, trust, and estate planning for over 15 years, and there are no secrets of the rich that we don't tell every other client. Sure, there are tactics that don't make sense for certain people until they hit a certain wealth threshold, but it doesn't mean that we wouldn't bring it up and use it. I had a client earlier this week who wanted to talk about asset protection, was sure a trust was going to get them exactly what they wanted. I had to tell them, well, there's not a trust where you can be the beneficiary of that trust and still have it be protected from your creditors. Fortunately, when it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Ultimately, bad trusts can waste your money, create fights, and ultimately delay the resolution of your estate. And that's not what anybody's looking for. So if you want a trust that actually works, make sure you're working with somebody who knows what they're doing and is going to be responsible for those results. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.